Bremen Asiam. In the Jumako in Asiam district.
Okay. Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
There we go for Rita Comey.
Yes, please, I'm Rita Makome. I'm also a teacher at a basic school, Akimoda Ridge Experimental Primary.
Okay, that's interesting. Welcome on board.
Thank you, sir.
Let's go for Beatrice Bukwe, right?
Yes, Doc.
Yes.
Beatrice Adofowa Bequin, a basic teacher at Janza MA in the Ashanti region.
Ashanti region. Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you,
Better
Doc.
continue. Your name is interesting.
Yes. Better continue.
Better, how do you pronounce your surname?
Better continue.
Continua. Am I right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Where are you joining us from?
From Boss.
From where?
Gosu.
Gosu.
The Ahafo
Okay.
region.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Then
Let's do at
come again.
for money.
I can't hear you properly, but you're welcome. Let's go to Ajua. Is it Ajua Villas? Let's go to Alice Abba Boyson. Alice, can you hear me? Hello, Alice. Joseph Kofi Asante. Godwin Osafo.
Yes, please. My name is Joseph Kofi Asante. I'm currently at the Central Region. I'm a basic school teacher at Belmont for Sonsa, the Central Region.
Okay. Okay, you are welcome.
Thank you, sir.
And I also saw Godwin Osafo.
Yes,
Godwin, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm Godwin Osafun too. I'm also a teacher at Akusumo International School, VRA.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
So, who hasn't spoken? If you can hear me and if not, introduce yourself, you can go ahead.
Yes, sir. Mercy Holochienunam from Volta Region Akachi, a basic school teacher.
The surname again, Lochi.
Holochi, yeah, Mercy Enyunam.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, so who else is here to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Estelle.
I am Samilia Mofa from Ashanti region.
Amofa
Samilia.
All right. From where?
Ashanti region.
Ashanti region. All right. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Danny, you can go ahead.
Daniel Enchi Ade, Ashanti region, West Coast Center, a teacher at the basic school.
Okay. All right. So quickly we almost running out of time, and today we're having a graduation ceremony for our postgraduate students. So I discussed earlier with your course rep that we may do 2 hours maximum, and see how best you can rearrange to cover the time lost. So quickly, let's go through the course outline and see what we are supposed to go through. So I'm going to share my screen now, and then we look at the outline. Then probably we kickstart what we are supposed to do this semester. Hope you can see.
Yes, please.
Yes, so we're going to see this course and then go through how basically students can use basic mathematical and statistical techniques that is necessary for analyzing business complex problems to help us make business decisions. So the quantitative method we're going to go through is basically how we are going to expose ourselves to the various types of data, how we can present these data mathematically, and then also use statistical models to transform or interpret the data into suitable management decision information. And so per the various courses, we're going to start with the introduction to quantitative methods, where we will look at the meaning of the quantitative method by definition. And then we also look at some uses of quantitative method as well as uses of quantitative method. We will quickly also look at the tools of quantitative methods. And from the tools, we look at the various data types and how, when we collect data, we can present these data. And so the data presentation, we will look at the basic ones, right from the bar chart, pie charts, pictogram, histogram, cumulative frequency curves, Lorentz curve, and some others. Then we will also look at why the need for us to be able to gather data and even present these data into the various forms through the business applications. Then from there, we will look at the measures of central location for both group data and on-group data. When we say measures of central location, we basically looking at when, for instance, we have a given set of data, how we can find the midpoint of that data or the middle of the data. So for this class, we can consider the age of every student that has joined today. And then when we have the various ages, we can then decide to look at the center of that particular age distribution. And then this center, mainly what comes into mind is the mean when we are calculating the average. However, we will also talk about the mode as well as the median. And this is going to go for both group data and on-group data. By on-group data, when we consider the age distribution of individuals in the class, then we are looking at on-grouped. By the moment we try to categorize some of the data into respective brackets, for instance, when we consider the ages that are less than 20 and those between 20 and less than 30, and then consider those above 30, then it means that we've been able to categorize the age distribution of the class into those respective categories, and that is what we refer to as a grouped data. So we will look at the dynamics for both group data and on-group data. And then even with the mean, we will further look at some other forms of mean based on their characteristics. Hence, we will talk about the weighted mean and why we even apply the weighted mean. We will also talk about the geometric mean as well as the harmonic mean. Then we consider the application of measures of central tendency. From there, we will look at its complement. That's a measure of dispersion, also for grouped and non-grouped data. And here we're going to look at the standard deviation, the coefficient of variation, the interquartile ranges, semi-quartile ranges. We will look at the skewness of the data distribution. We will talk about kurtosis and the rest. These are the various forms of data dispersion, and that is coming as a result of whenever we have a given data distribution. Once we are able to locate the center, for instance, the age distribution of the class that I used as an example earlier on, when we are able to determine the average age of the class to be, let's say, 30 years, the 30 years does not necessarily mean every individual is 30 years. And so the measures of dispersion is now coming in to look at the various ages. For instance, if you look at Abukari's age, how close or far is it from the average that we've been able to compute it? When we look at that of Rita's age, is Rita's age, how far or near is Rita's age from the center that we've been looking at? And so these various dispersion, or other ways, how the individual elements within the distribution are moving away from the center, is what we refer to as the measure of dispersion. And we will also look at how we can compute these measures of dispersion. Then from there, we will move straight into correlation and regression analysis and its application. So we will look at the meaning of correlation, which basically is referring to the relationship that exists between various data sets. And so we can easily come across some of the common relationship that exists between various data. For instance, we all know that when it comes to demand, for instance, when we say the price of a product goes down, the corresponding relationship is that the quantity of that product that will be demanded is going to go high. And so there is a sort of relationship that exists between the price of a commodity and the quantity of that commodity that normally consumers do demand. And so you'll be just looking at these relationships and then look at ways of computing the relationship that exists between various variables, starting with what we refer to as a scatter diagram, where we're going to have a plot of various coordinates of the two variables that we have as interest, and then see how the display of that plot is showing. When we get there, you realize that for certain pattern, when we see that these patterns do exist within that data plot, then we can conclude that there is a positive, a negative, or a no relationship that exists between two variables. And so we will start with the scatter plot or the scatter diagram, and then we will also look at Pearson's product movement correlation coefficient. And then from there, we will also look at Spearman's rank correlation coefficient. These two come with their own characteristics. And so based on the characteristics of the data that we have at our disposal, we'll determine which of the various correlations that ought to be computed for a given set of data. And then we will also look at the correlation coefficient of a non-linear variable. And so we will go through these correlation analysis and then further complement it with the coefficient of determination, and then we will look at its application, the correlation application through investment portfolio and the covariance measurement. Then we will end that session with the computation of regression. And so correlation always determines the relationship. However, it doesn't necessarily give us how much of a change that you're going to see if we realize that, for instance, there is a negative relationship between price and quantity. Correlation will just tell us that there is a negative relationship or a positive relationship, but the magnitude of that relationship, it is not able to really tell that when you are able to change your price by 1 unit, how much unit of the quantity is it going to be affected? That one is not determined. And so we will go further to look at how regression come to complement the relationship that correlation gives us. And then for regression, we will look at the methods of least square regression and how we can compute the method of least square. Then along that line, we may have our first quiz, of which I know that the communication will come to you. So the university will communicate with you on when the quiz will be held. But normally I know that there will be a reversal where we have to look at all the topics. Then you come in with your quizzes and your exams. And so the modalities and everything will be communicated on due date. Now from the quiz, we will start looking at differentiation and integration, where we will look at how we can use basic calculus techniques to look at the relationship that exists between marginal concepts as well as the total and the average functions. And so we will look at how, when we have a total cost function, how we can convert into marginal as well as the average and vice versa. So we will look at this relationship between these concepts by applying the concept differentiation and integration. And then finally, on our list, we will look at first the concept of probability, and then we will also look at the probability distribution theory, where we will be looking at the various distribution theories, the binomial, Poisson, and then the normal distribution, and their application to the normal business decision process. And so this is basically the various courses that we're going to look at in this course, the various topics we're going to look at in this course. I will recommend these 2 reading materials. I don't know if there are copies, but the second one particularly, I know when you go online, you get access to it, Quantitative Methods for Business by Waters. And then the first one was written by our own provost. So the provost of the College of Distance Education has a book also titled Quantitative Methods for Business Decision Making, where theory meets practice. And so we can, I'll later look at, if possible, we can get access to that material. And then it will be, these 2 will be our reading materials that will help us through this course. I was happy that through the introduction, most of you were exposed to mathematics. And so it is not going to be much of a problem, and I believe so. However, whenever we meet for class, I'll urge you all to have your notepad with you, as well as having your calculator, so that we go through basic computation together, which will help us prepare effectively for our assessment purpose. And so for assessment, you're going to look at 1, your quiz is going to constitute 20, and then there will be some group assignments. Because of your dispersion and your number, we may resort to having individual assignments. And then your end of semester will constitute 60%. And when we add the 3 assessments, you get your total 100%. For policy, I will be referring you to, once you are students, I will be referring you to the Academic Policy and Regulation Handbook of the university. And it gives you caution on attendance, I believe that sometimes once we are doing it online, we may have our own challenges ranging from network issues and the rest. But I will encourage all of you to that. Per the nature of this course, most of the time, let's prepare ahead and then be able to join on the link and also on time so that you'll be able to cover enough of the things that have been listed on this outline. Then for class participation, I am going to monitor all those who are going to participate in class, because as part of the assessment, there is a hope for those who are going to participate in the class. And it's also going to, in a way, encourage some of the assessment scores that you will see later when you write your exams. Now, for the assignment of which I'm going to give you today, the submission is such that when you submit it late, it will be considered not submitted at all. So let us be cautious about when we are supposed to submit assignment. And most of the time, I'll give you reading assignments as well, so that you prepare ahead of time before we meet and discuss the content of the various topics that have been presented in here. So this ends the course outline. And I'll pause here for expectations and questions for 5 minutes. If you have any expectation to this course, and then any clarification or question you can ask, then we move on. So you just raise up your hand, and then I give you the platform. Is there any question, concern? Hello?
Hi.
Yes, let me hear you. We are having an adult education, so it should be interactive. Let me hear you talking. If you don't voluntarily say something, then I have to mention names. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, sir. We can hear you very clear.
Yes, we can hear.
Yes, so share with me some of your expectations, and then we start the first lecture. The next 5 minutes.
Please, I want to find out if there will be some kind of guidance as to questioning to guide our learning and all of that.
Yes, there is going to be. I'll try and share with you some tutorial sets as we move through the various topics, and then when you're able to solve these tutorial sets effectively, at least you will have the confidence that you do for the exams. And also, when you're learning on your own and you come across any challenges, you draw the class attention so that we all try and resolve that difficulties. I hope I've answered you.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other? Any other concern? Yes, Abukari.
Because I'm expecting that more try pushing will be posted on the platform as
No what?
more try pushing will be posted on the platform for us to try our hands on it. More try pushing.
Okay. That will be done.
Yes. Yes.
Any other concern? I take a last one, then we start. Any other concern? Okay, so if there is no concern, I think we can start with our first lecture, where we will combine both the introduction as well as the data collection and presentation. We can start that one. I hope you can see the slides.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so
Yes, please.
the first lecture is going to cover these content as we discussed in the course outline. So I told you that we're going to have our first assignment. So the first assignment is that we're going to create a questionnaire. So let's write it down. Your first assignment. Going to create a questionnaire. We are going to create a questionnaire using a Google form. We're going to create a questionnaire using a Google form. The questionnaire should be made up of 4 items each from the various data measurements. So let's write this assignment down. You're creating a questionnaire using a Google form, and the questionnaire is going to be made up of at least 4 items each from the various levels of data measurements. So we have 4 levels of data measurement. You will go through soon, and then I want you to have the questionnaire having at least 4 items for each of the various levels of data. And this assignment is aiming and exposing you to how to use the Google form in collecting data. And so you go online, and then if you are not aware of that, you learn on how to use the Google form to create a questionnaire. So let's start with the day's activity. I hope you've gotten the assignment clear. Hello? Okay.
Good.
So let's go on. Now, by definition, when we talk about quantitative method, we are just looking at the process of decision making that is placing emphasis on the quantification of variables that are of concern to authorities in decision making. We are just looking at how you can make decisions by mainly focusing on quantitative variables that are going to help authorities in their decision-making process. And by extension, we are saying that this quantitative method is when we're going to apply both mathematical and statistical models to analyzing complex business problems to help us formulate policies and strategies. And so these are the key elements that I've underlined in the definition. We're going to go through the process of applying mathematical and statistical models to analyze complex business problems that aim to formulate policies as well as strategies. And so when we have such a definition, then the question is, what are some of these tools that we are talking about? What are some of these models that we are talking about? So the models ranges from the use of, let's say, correlation, which is a statistical tool, and then the use of regression, as well as reusing, for instance, differentiation and integration. These are all mathematical tools that we are going to rely on to be able to analyze complex business problems that aims at formulating policy and strategy. So that is the key definition that we're going to have. So the use of this mathematical application or the quantitative method ranges from the various management issues, where we can talk about planning, forecasting, controlling, and the rest. So for instance, for planning, we can use this mathematical approach to plan, let's say, what we want to achieve as an organization. So if our aim is to maximize profit, for instance, as an organization, then the question is, how do we plan towards this? By planning, we can use some of these mathematical techniques. For instance, we can use the integration and the correlate, the integration as well as the differentiation to be able to plan ahead, to know how many quantity of a product we need to produce and sell to be able to make that targeted profit. So for planning purposes, we can use the various techniques that we saw in the course outline to be able to forecast as well as plan and make certain projections that will help the organization achieve its overall objective. And then for forecasting, we can now use the regression as a tool to be able to forecast likely figures that we are to see in the future. So for instance, we can rely on our past profits over the few years, and then based on it to forecast what is likely to happen in the coming year that is ahead of us, and that is by way forecasting. So forecasting basically is looking at really being able to look into the future and predict what is likely to happen within the future. Again, we can also use the quantitative method to help us control our activities. For instance, whatever we have planned and we have kept in place, as the organization moved through its operation year, you realize that sometimes the set targets may be easily achieved. Other times, you realize that there may be challenges achieving those targets. And so as you monitor the progress of the targets that you have set for yourself as an organization, then you can now bring in some control measures. And the control measures also have its various techniques that later we will look at them in being able to monitor the progress of our activities. And then when it comes to investment, we can also use the correlation analysis to look at the relationship that exists between the various investment vehicles. For instance, you want to invest in certain assets, and we all know this popular saying that we cannot put all our eggs in one basket. And so the question is, how do we then try to diversify our investments so that we can now mitigate the risk that is associated with the investment, and also aiming at getting the best of return? So portfolio management is one key area which you need to also understand in order to be able to manage your investment. And to do so, you will need the relationship that exists between the various investment vehicles that are at your disposal. So let's say investing in treasury bill complement investment in, let's say, fixed deposits, so that you will be able to now combine these two so that you don't lose all your investment when the unfortunate strike. And then you can also look at the financial and economic analysis, where basically we forecast using time series. So when you look at time series analysis as a tool, we can even use that one to forecast the various inflation figures that are being reported by the Ghana Statistical Service on periodic basis. So you can now study what is the trend within a particular economy, and then be able to forecast or predict those figures that serves as a caution or a directive in managing the economy. And so these are some uses of a quantitative method. There are lots, and I'll urge you that this time, because of technology, even our phone can do a lot. As we're going through, I'll share the slides with you after each session. And as you move through the slides, you should also try as much as possible and then be reading online, which will serve as a guide to the various documents that will be shared. From the uses of quantitative method, then we can talk about some of the tools. I've mentioned some already. The first two is the differentiation and then the integration, which is essential for planning. We can also look at the break-even analysis, which is also a tool for planning. And the break-even is just looking at that situation where when a manufacturing firm is able to produce, it is just giving us that sense of control, where we are now going to look at how much of a unit of that particular product I need to produce and sell to be able to recoup all my initial investment. So the break-even analysis will give you that clue that when you're able to produce this X unit of a product, then at least you are not making profits, neither you making a loss. So for you to make a profit, it will tell you that then you need to produce and sell more than that particular break-even point. And that is also for planning, where in actual sense, if you are targeting a particular profit, then you need to also go through this analysis to give you a clue of how much of a unit you should produce and sell to get that targeted profit. We can also talk about the time value of money, which is also essential for decision, because we all believe that there is no change in value. Who remember that advert? When we had our redenomination, the song that I do remember is "There is no change in value."
The
value is the same.
You can now attest that since then, the CD that was introduced in 2007 is not having the same value as the CD now, which typically tells us that when we have a particular amount of money, that quantity of things that the money can buy at a particular point in time will not be the same at another time, which means that time will always determine the value of the same amount of money that you have at your disposal. And so for investment purposes, you will need the time value of money analysis to be able to understand the dynamics within the investment. We have other tools like the matrices, and then the correlation, regression, time series analysis, probability, linear programming, which have their own purpose. They serve different purposes in terms of the usefulness of these tools. And so these tools complement some other tools for us to be able to understand the various business problems that we are faced as an organization. Any question up to this point? Any question?
No question for now. So
okay. If there is no question, then we move on into the second aspect of today's activity, where we are going to look at data. Now, your assignments start from here. So these are the various levels of data measurement, and your questionnaire is supposed to have 4 items each. So I will urge you to pay key attention here. Then I know that at this point you are going to ask questions because assessment is at stake. Is that the case? Okay, so let's talk about data. Now, when we come to data, I always say that data and information is that element that the definition from basic school still holds when it comes to the tertiary. You remember we said that a data is a raw information, and an information is a processed data. Our basic definition, if you ask our class 2 people, class 4, and our upper primary people, they will tell you that data is an unprocessed information. Then the reverse is true for information. And that is also true because here we are still saying that when we have raw numbers or facts that are processed, then it turns into information. And so data refers to an unprocessed facts or numbers. So when you look at that definition, it's still relevant because data does not by itself communicate any understanding unless we are able to process that particular data and it becomes a useful information depending on who is using that particular information. So that is the data. However, we know we have 2 basic types of data. We know we have 2 basic types of data. One is a qualitative data, and then the other is a quantitative data. When we talk about qualitative data, we are referring to all the data sets that by nature or inherently we use words to describe. Qualitative, we are going to use words to describe. For instance, if I ask any of you to describe your gender, I believe that the answer that you're going to have is either going to be a male or female. At certain jurisdictions, some people will argue that there are others. But I think in Ghana, when we talk about the types of data, particularly referring to gender, then we can describe our gender as male and female. The fact that you are saying male and female simply means that we are using words, male and female, to describe gender, which is what we are referring to as a qualitative data. So the definition for qualitative data, again, we are referring to all type of data that inherently we are measuring using, or we are describing using words. And then when we come to quantitative, then we are looking at the opposites, where we are looking at all data. That's when we are trying to describe, we use numbers naturally. We use numbers. For example, when I ask any of us, what is your age? The first thing you mention is a number. 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, 25 years, 35 years, and so on. And so because we are using numbers to describe age, it means that age is a quantitative data. And so every data that we use numbers to describe naturally, then that data is a quantitative data. And all data that we use words to describe naturally, then it means that those data sets are what we refer to as the qualitative data. Now, let me further distinguish this by saying that it does not necessarily mean that qualitative data cannot be turned into numbers. For instance, the male and female, we can decide that we are now representing male with 1. And then we represent female with 2. And that is how we want to describe the data gender. So the fact that we are using 1 to represent male and 2 to represent female does not make gender quantitative, though we have 1 and 2. Because naturally, the 1 and 2 does not actually describe gender, but we are trying to now reassign the numbers to that particular description. And so naturally, that is why I use the term naturally. When we have any data set that can be described with words, then we can say that we are talking about qualitative. And those that we can use numbers, they are quantitatives. So at this point, I have given you 1 example each. And so I'll call names that will help me also get some other examples. For instance, so when I mention your name, you just decide to give me a type of data and you tell me whether it is qualitative or a quantitative. I hope it's clear. Hello.
Hi.
I want to hear you. At this point, you are doing adult education, so let the interactions flow. Okay. So let's start with Daniel. Daniel Naku. You can give me an example of either a qualitative or a quantitative. Please, let's feel free. In this class, no answer is correct. No answer is wrong. We are all discussing. So let's feel free to contribute. Daniel, are you there? I don't want to believe that some of you just joined and you went to sleep.
Yeah, here.
Okay. So Daniel is not responding. Let's go to Beatrice. Beatrice, are you there?
Yes, please.
Yes, so let's have 1 example, either quantitative or qualitative.
Okay, so an example is me giving exercise and then the scores or grades of the exercise. I will
Okay.
put it under quantitative data.
Quantitative. That's fine. That's very good. And so when we talk about your score in an exams, you realize that the score is going to be a number that is being expressed as a percentage of the total score. And so score from exams is a very good example of quantitative data. Any other example?
Yes, and the qualitative.
Qualitative, okay.
Okay, so I will engage them by asking questions. Maybe which food you like best or most.
So that's also correct. So you can be collecting data on the food your respondents like the most.
Yes,
so,
please.
Yes, so go through the discussion with us. Why do you say it is qualitative?
They'll be using words to describe the food they like. For example, rice, banku, fufu. Because per your explanation, you said it's a type of data measuring using words to describe. Yeah. So I based on that explanation to give that example.
Excellent. Excellent. That's very good. Okay. Any other person to help us with other examples? Remember the assignment. You are going to have no less than 4. So Prince.
Okay, we also have remarks for exam score.
Remarks, okay. Explain further.
example, assuming you had 80 in an exams, maybe you get excellent as the remark or very good as the remark.
Okay. Okay. So the various remarks that are there for our performance, then we can say that it is qualitative, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. That's very fine. Any other? I saw Mercy coming in.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Mercy.
Please, situational report that we give at the end of the term to, in terms of the number of exercise we give the pupils on quantitative and other informations on ourselves and the people's performance in a qualitative form.
So the other information, I want you to break it down.
Okay.
Which other informations are we considering here?
Okay, as one of our colleagues has said about the remarks that we give.
Which other can we have?
Let's say when the learners on average, learners below average,
Okay.
and those the best ones too. Those classifications that are not in numbers but in words, just to describe their groups. So they are in qualitative.
Okay. So as you giving this example, then I will encourage you to be more specific. Because sometimes the exams will be requiring you to indicate the level of measurement for a particular variable, whether it is qualitative or quantitative. And I like the way you are doing the analysis. When naturally it is described using numbers, then we say they are quantitative, whereas those that are naturally described using words are qualitative. Okay, so let's move on. Now we're going to connect this qualitative, quantitative to these 4 levels of data measurement. And the 4 levels of data measurement are the nominal level of data, ordinal level, interval, and then the ratio. And how we've arranged these levels of data measurements, the first one is the basic level of data measurement. Then we go through the higher order in terms of how data is being described. So let's go through them one after the other and connect it to the types of data as in the qualitative and the quantitative. Now, when we talk about a nominal data, we are referring to a qualitative data. Remember, qualitative, we said that it is that data that naturally we can describe. The description of the data is in words. So a nominal data is a qualitative data that can only be put into categories. The only thing we can do to that data set is to be able to put them into categories. For instance, when we come to the common example that I gave, gender, we can only categorize gender into male and then female without having any natural order. We cannot say that female is better than male, and we cannot also say that the males are better than female. And when we open this debate, I don't think today we will close from this class. And so normally, we always say that when the data set is qualitative, and all that we can do is to put them into categories, then we are referring to nominal data. Let me add the next one, which is the ordinal data. Then we look at some other examples. For ordinal level of data, they are also a qualitative data. In other words, they are that data that naturally, when we want to measure, we use words to describe. However, for ordinal level of data, though we can put them into the categories as we saw in nominal data, However, we can also see some natural order within that particular data set. And so when you look at the exam's remarks that was mentioned, you realize that when you have excellent, excellent is preferred to very good, and very good is also preferred to good, and good is also preferred to, let's say, satisfactory or average, and the rest. So we are using words to categorize certain class of performance. However, one is seen to be superior than the other. And so we say there are natural orders within that particular database. Are you with me? Yes, so the difference here is that though nominal level of data and ordinal level of data are both qualitative data sets, one, we can only put them into categories. The other, we can put them into categories and also have some natural order in that particular data set. So let's look at another example of the nominal. Now, the nominal, we can say that when I want to collect data on the various centers that you are coming from, normally you are going to mention words. So some will be saying they are joining from WA, others are joining from Goso. We have people coming from Ejumaku, others in Cape Coast, and the rest. So the various places that you are joining from, the various centers that you are joining from, basically forms the various categories. And so your center becomes a category, but you cannot say that somebody from WA is superior than somebody from, let's say, Goso, and the vice versa. We cannot do that. We can only categorize the centers and then give a word to describe that particular center, not necessarily having any order among that particular centers. But when you come to the ordinal level, your academic qualification, for instance, when we talk about our academic qualification, we can even start from the BEC. Some people have BEC certificate, others have the WASI or the SSC or whichever one that you have from the secondary school. And then others will be having the diploma certificate. Now we are even saying we have the HND, and then we have the first degree. We have the second degree. Even among the second degree, there are some categories. And so there are various categories to describe academic qualification. And when you look at these levels of categories, you realize that as you move from one to the other, you are now having some natural order that exists among these various types of data. And so nominal goes ahead to also bring some distinctive natural order among the various categories that we are seeing in the qualitative data. And nominal normally also have the various categories, but there is no natural order among these two data sets. I hope it is clear.
Yes, please.
Yes, now let's think about other examples and let's see if it is going down well. So Joseph Kofi Asante. If you are there, let me, any of them, you can decide to go for the nominal or the ordinal. Then you give a justification to it, why you think that particular data is nominal or ordinal. Are you there? Joseph? Can we have Kobna entry? See, am I seeing? Stephen Opari? Is Stephen there? Is it that they are joined and they are doing other things, or they are having challenges? Rita, are you there?
Yes, please.
You raise your hand, cry. Our spirits were communicating.
Please, with the nominal, I can say collecting data about the type of religion we practice.
Okay.
As the Christian religion, the three main religions. It's nominal because none of them is superior over the other.
Very good.
I would say it's nominal. And the ordinal, I can say data about ranks in the GAS. The principal superintendent, senior sup 1, senior sup director, that one is ordinal because it can be ranked. One is maybe superior than the other.
Okay. Can we have any other example? Hello.
Say, what about collecting data on the height of students and then against their names? Collecting data on the height of students can be quantitative, then qualitative is their names against their names.
Can you come again with your example?
I said the quantitative, collecting data on the height of students.
Height of students, okay.
Yes, and then qualitative, their names.
Their names. Yes, that is very right. But we've moved from the qualitative to nominal and ordinal. So the ones that you are mentioning,
okay. Actually,
categorize them under
I got
nominal.
down.
Oh, okay. Okay, so
I got down and joined.
let's analyze the example she's raising. So for instance, let's consider the qualitative, the names of, let's say, students. Will names of students be nominal or ordinal?
To be nominal.
Nominal. Yes. Why do you think so?
I think because it's not naturally ordinary manner, because names are genuine names. None of them is superior than that.
Everybody's name is sweet to the person.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we cannot see that somebody's name is better or superior than another. That's fine. Can we have another example? Last one, then we move on.
Sir, please,
Yes, ma'am.
about the first example, the students can be categorized in their genders, let's say female or male. It's also a nominal still.
Yes, so male and female students will be nominal. Which other category can we put students?
Still nominal.
That can constitute ordinal.
The students.
Yes. So picture your school. Picture your school, and then let's see. Can we have order in students? What will make we consider students as ordinal?
Yes, please. Their level.
Their level. So,
yeah, as in lower,
yes,
primary, upper, and then JHS.
Yes. So normally, because of the levels in students, you can see that those at the lower level are the lower, and then those at the upper level are superior in terms of the levels of the class the students are in. So that is
the academic performance.
Explain that further.
I'm talking about the academic performance. That is maybe at the end of the term, looking at the score and then the position that they obtain. It is ranked.
But you now realize that the score is numbers.
Yeah.
But the two we are discussing are words. Are you following?
I am following. That's why I'm saying that.
So you have to always place emphasis on the definition. You are saying that nominal is a qualitative. Ordinal is also what? Qualitative. So your example will be very important when we get to the next two. They are words, but you can still see some order in it. And that is what we use to describe the interval level of data. I hope you are now you are ahead of the class in terms of understanding.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
I know.
Hello, sir. My name is
Yes,
Joseph.
Gordon, I can hear you.
That is my example about the nominal and the ordinal. So when I say
Yes.
that is teachers as nominal, all teachers.
All teachers are nominal.
Nominal. The ordinal is that is the rank teachers, headmasters, CISOs, directors, HRs, and also the ordinal. That is the rank.
Exactly. So you talk about the rank of teachers, and you can see that
That's
level of order. Okay. Was it Godwin or Asante?
Joseph.
Okay. I can see Godwin also want to have something to say. So now let me allow you for 2 minutes. Let's write as many as possible the various levels of data measurement or the various data that we can use nominal and ordinal. If you have your chart or whatever tool you have, let's see what, for instance, chart or meta AI will say. Examples of nominal data and then examples of ordinal data. Let's try that and see. I'm giving you 2 minutes. Is that okay? Hello?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Okay. Can we share some of the results we had? Hello.
Hello, sir.
So let's share some of the results that we got from the online search for nominal and ordinal. Who is starting with us?
Yeah. Say, with the now I've gotten it with the nominal. We are looking at, let's say, cities. You can list cities without them being in order. Then we look at the ordinal data. With that one, we can look at the like low, mild, or let's say more low, mild, and severe. In that order.
Which other? Exactly. Which other example did you also see?
Like blood groups.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you now. Rita, you've muted yourself. Rita, can come in.
Please, the nominal, I got data on marital status. That single, married, divorce. That's nominal.
Okay.
And also nationality of an individual, whether you were Ghanaian, Nigerian, or Togolese.
Okay, that is also nominal.
As nominal. And then ordinal, the data on degree classification. That's first class, second class, upper, second class, lower, third class.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And then I also got a recovery status of a patient. Whether the patient is fully recovered, improving, or no changes, or the condition is even worsening.
That's very good. Any other person to share what he or she got? Hello. Now
Hello.
the class is being for 5.
So I also have here for the nominal, I have the phone type of phone that we use, Samsung, iPhone, Techno, and the rest. I also have eye color. We have brown, blue, green. Eye color.
That's fine.
Okay.
And then give me some for ordinal.
For the ordinal, I have a satisfaction rating. That's poor, fair, good, very good, excellent. Then socioeconomic status, low, middle, high. Then our grading system, grade A, B, C, D.
Okay. That's very fine. So at least you are 2 steps away from having your assignment done. Rita, your hand is up again.
Yes, please, it's a question.
All right.
Please, the nominal, the example that my sister said, phones. Please, I want to ask, is it a type of phone or just names of phone? Because if type of phone, I could say it's nominal because some phones are superior than others. But if it's just names of phones, they are for that one, I will say the nominal.
So let's break that one down. The moment she said the types of phones, it depends on the responses, okay? So the types of phones and the her responses that came, that is why we're saying nominal, because once she mentioned what type of phone are you using, then people begin to say, the categories were Samsung, iPhone, Techno, let's say Itel, and the rest. We are putting the phones into the various brand type. And so that makes it a nominal level of data because we are only putting them into categories. In the same vein, when we even go into one brand of phone, we realize that there are some which are superior than the others. Let's take the iPhone, for example. Somebody who is holding iPhone 7, and then let's say even 7 Plus, you realize that there is a grade. And then you can now say that because there is that level, natural level, in terms of the grade of the phone, we can now call it a nominal data. So the same phone type, the response category can make it a nominal, and at the same time, the response category can make it an ordinal level of data. I hope that is clear.
Yes, please.
Yes. So that was a very good example. Samelia, your hand was, yes, you said something.
Mine was said by the first lady. So the one that was left out was the color of hair.
Color of hair, okay.
Color of hair, and then with the ordinal, they gave us agreeing to something. That is either you strongly agree, you disagree, or you are neutral. That kind of area.
Okay. So these are the various types of data that we can have under these two categories. Now let's move to the last two quickly, and then we see how we can also explain them. Now, when we talk about the interval level of data, I had one of the examples talking about some figures, and I said that it will be suitable for the interval, in the sense that the interval is just looking at quantitative data that are naturally described using numbers. And we still have that sort of natural order within that particular data. That data qualifies to be an interval data. So interval is a quantitative data that we have that range inside. And then we can also say that the interval data is not having a natural zero, which simply means that when we see zero within an interval data or a set of data, and we have a different meaning to the zero other than the actual meaning to the zero, then we are referring to an interval, in the sense that, for instance, when we talk about our body temperature being measured in degrees Celsius, we know that when we have 0 degrees Celsius, that zero is not communicating that the individual or person is not having any temperature. The zero there is communicating a temperature. That's usually in science we refer to as the freezing point. And so the zero in a given set of data, that is not communicating nothing. It's actually what we refer to as the interval level of data measurement. And then when we find the opposite, when it comes to the ratio level of data measurement, ratio is also a quantitative data. However, in ratio, whenever we see zero, it is communicating the actual sense of the zero, which means that there is nothing. And a typical example that I usually use is your Momo account balance. And so when we check our Momo account balance and it is zero, we can all attest to the fact that it means that we do not have any amount in your Momo account. And so whenever the data is having zero, but that zero is communicating something, then we refer to as an interval level of data. And whenever we have a quantitative data that has zero, and the zero is communicating the true nature of zero, which means nothing, then that is referring to a ratio data. So this one, it is very close, but you have to pay attention to the natural zero and then the one which is not having a natural zero, as well as the interval. You can go ahead and then also see that the interval is similar to the ordinal, where we are saying that there is some natural sort of order within the value that we are seeing. For instance, the example that one gave, if you recall, I forgot, was it better? Who gave the example? Or so it was Somalia. Your name, is it Somalia?
Samilia.
Samilia. Okay. The example that
Samilia.
came, that's fine. That example that came. So we have to pay attention to the definition. Anytime you are given a given data to describe the level of measurement, one, you have to ask yourself, is this data measured qualitatively or quantitatively? At least that one will help you to know whether it is going for nominal, ordinal, or it is going for interval and ratio. So the qualitative and quantitative is that first step, which will help you to know or delete two options, and then you focus on the two. Now, when it is qualitative, then you ask yourself, are we having some natural order within the data, or we cannot have any natural order? Once there is a natural order, then it means that it is ordinal. If there is no natural order but qualitative, then it is nominal. Then when you come to the last two, if you're able to establish that the data is quantitative, then you ask yourself, is there a natural zero or not? Once you're able to establish that fact, then it means that if there is a natural zero, then it is ratio. If there is no natural zero, then it means we are talking about interval. So we can also go through the same process to get more examples when we close from the session. Particularly at this point, that is why I've spent much time here. The levels of data measurement, just go online and then search for the various data examples that can be measured using these 4 skills. And it will help you to now come up with your questionnaire. Now let's move away from here. Let's move away from here and also look at another category of data, where we are now categorizing data into the primary data as well as the secondary data. When we talk about primary data, we are referring to the data that we are collecting for the very first time from the field. And so whenever we want to collect data for the very first time, then we are saying that data is a primary data. And this, we can even connect it to the source document that we did in our accounting class. Whenever we talk about a source document, that is a primary document that you are using to prepare your account. And then once you use the source document to prepare your journals, and then it turns into the ledgers and then the trial balance, then they become a secondary data, where we are saying that the secondary data is that data which has been collected already. Sometimes you may even have processed the data to some point, and they also serve as a fresh data for further analysis. And so if the data is already collected and processed, then we refer that one to a secondary data. And the one that we collected for the very first time, we refer to as the primary. And these are some examples that you can see. So for instance, if you're talking about the primary data, we can collect primary data through experiments. And then this one, normally the lab activities, we conduct some experiment and then we are able to see the outcome. As the experiment is ongoing, we are able to write reports, and those reports tends to be the data that we can rely. And then surveys like the census that we did, realize that the Ghana Statistical Service in 2021 came to your various homes asking so many questions. And those is what that activity is what we refer to as a survey. They come there with some structured questions and then they ask you, you give responses. And that is a survey. It is also to collect data for the very first time. So currently, when you go to their website, you realize that those data they collected are being processed, and they are now able to tell that this is the growing district when it comes to Ghana, a particular region is the most poorest region, or you can even say that these are the number of people who are living under the poverty line. These are outcomes from the various surveys that we go through. And so they collect different set of data through the survey. Then we can also use questionnaire, and that is where your assignment is coming from. So you have to go around this because you are going to have it as an assignment. I won't speak much about it. However, questionnaire can be close-ended or open-ended. Where when we talk about close-ended questionnaire, we are referring to those questions that come with options that you are only going to select. You are being restricted as to what you are giving as a response. For instance, if you go and write any objective test quiz and you realize that the options are A to D, you are restricted from choosing A, B, C, or D, and that is a close-ended. Your responses are subject to what have been provided to you. And so you are being closed in terms of what you can give as a response. And then when we come to the open-ended, it means that you have been given that liberty to provide whichever range of question you want, answer or response you want. So for instance, if I ask you to indicate your age on my questionnaire, I'm just asking of your age, but the close-ended will provide you with some options where you will see that when you are 20 to 30 years, you have to just check that particular box. And then when you are 31 to 40 years, you check another box. I'm only restricting you to what you can give. But the open-ended will not give you these options. You have to indicate if you are 25 years, you just write your 25 years. And that is how the open-ended questionnaire is. There are certain questionnaire sets that can combine both open-ended and close-ended information. And that is up to whatever information or data you want to collect from your respondents. And so for your assignment, I'm reminding you that you are now supposed to go back based on the examples that you are giving here, follow the Google form or the Google document, and then create your own questionnaire. And when you are done with the questionnaire, by the time we meet for the third meeting, I'll collect the questionnaire. And so the third meeting, I'll collect it so that we discuss it during the fourth and the final meeting. Just go through the various examples or data that can be measured using these four. So you are supposed to have at least 4 data for nominal. You are supposed to have 4 items for ordinal, 4 items for interval, and then 4 items for ratio. So this is the assignment. And I'm hopeful that you are going to do just to it. And then from there, you can also talk about interview, where people come to you, ask you questions, and you speak or react to the questions that have been given. So as you speak, your words are being considered as a data, where people will have to sit down, go through certain processes, starting from transcribing that particular data and then now making meanings out of the data through so many processes. And then observations as well. Normally, students are very good at observing their facilitators. And I know most of you, you are quiet and you are still on. Just observing. As you are going through, so many things are going through your mind. How is this lecture going to be? Is it going to be difficult? Is it going to give us some small space? Is it going to be tough in terms of assessment you're observing? You don't know yet. So you were waiting patiently to be able to collect that particular data. And I know the 1 hour, 30 minutes that we've done, so many data have been collected already. So that is with the observation. So you just sit back, then you relax, and then you are able to gather some information. And then for the secondary sources, we have the books, we have the magazines, we even have some online database like the Ghana Statistical Service that I talked about. You can go and then talk about the Ghana Stock Exchange These are sources that have already collected data that have been stored for you in the form of the books, magazines, and the online base. And maybe we can even talk about the financial statements, where we have so many information being presented on the company that is producing those statements. And so these are the issues, particularly with data types and how we can describe these data. Any question? Any question? Any questions so far? I told your rep that today we are not going to go far. So let's see in the next 27 minutes if we can have other things done. Now, when we have the data collected, now we've seen the various types of data, their meaning, and how we can even collect the data. When we collect these data, then we have to think about how best we can present these data so that it doesn't become so much of difficulty in terms of reading meaning to that particular data. You just assuming that where you are teaching, you collect data with respect to where each of your students is coming from, and then you write it without you trying to present it in some orderly manner. You realize that reading and making meaning to that data becomes a challenge because of the volume of the particular data. And so we have to be thinking about how clearly we are going to identify the data in terms of reading the patterns as well as managing how the characteristics of that data is looking. And so for data presentation, it is basically going to rely on the various levels of data measurement. So if you have a nominal data, we have to present it in a different manner as compared to ordinal. And then we also have to present ordinal differently from interval and then ratio. And that is why it is very important for us to understand these various levels of data measurement. Because, for instance, when we talk about bar charts, we are just trying to present data graphically by looking at how the frequency of that data or the relative frequency of that data is relating to the underlying data. Now, we use the bar chart normally to present qualitative data. So the bar chart normally is used to present the qualitative data. And for qualitative data, we know we have the nominal and then we have the ordinal. So any of these two levels of data measurement, we can present it with the bar chart. And by bar chart, we are only trying to summarize the data into frequencies. And then the frequency, which basically talks about the occurrence of the individual data and how best we can present that data using bars having equal weight. And then the frequency is used as the height of that particular data. These are things that we normally come across in our daily activities as teachers. And so we're just going to run through fast. Once you are at the basic level, I know that when we talk about the tally and the rest, it is something we can easily identify. So this as an illustration, let's change the scores. So let's say below are the, so you, because it is qualitative, let's maintain the scores and then have in mind that we normally use qualitative to represent the bar chart. So assuming these are the scores of 20 students in the test and they are scoring like this, we can now present these data using bar charts by first grouping the data or finding the frequency distribution of these data. And so I remember way back that when we were around primary 6 or so, we were doing the score, then we look at tally, then we bring our frequency here. And so for instance, if I pick score 19, which is there, and then 13, as well as 9, I just draw the tally by having that bars. For instance, if I cancel the 19, then I draw a tally here to indicate that I have one element which is with the 19. Then I cancel the 13 and I draw again. I have my 19 following, so I draw another bar, 13 comes, 9 comes in with for the first time, another 9, then 9 again, 13 follows. I hope you are following what I'm doing.
Yes, sir.
19 comes in, then 13 comes. Now, once we get the fifth one, it crosses. And these are the tallies that we were doing way back in upper primary. And so we do the tallies, and after counting the number of tally that we have, that represents the frequency. And so before you plot this one into the bar chart, you're now going to have the tallies as we have indicated. Then they give you the frequencies. You realize that out of the 20 individuals, 5 of them scored the 19, and then 9 scored 13, and then 6 scored 9. Then we can now draw our bar charts by representing the various scores or grades with the on the horizontal axis, and then we represent the frequency on the vertical axis. In other words, we can have a horizontal axis as the x-axis, and then the vertical, which is the y-axis, like this. So the scores will be here. If you have 19, 13, and 9, then we indicate the height. With the height, we know it is ranging from 6 to 9, and so you can have here, let's say if here is 6, you can have 7, 8, 9 in that particular order, whichever scale that we choose. Then we can draw our respective bars on it. So if you have the first bar, the next one, which is 9, will have a different bar. Then we will have the next bar as presented here. So these are the steps in getting your bar charts. So this is not drawn to scale. So if you want to have the proper scaled one, then this is how we are going to see our bar charts. So we only have to get our tally to get our frequency when we have the raw values. And when we get the frequency, we plot the frequency at the horizontal, vertical axis, and then the scores comes to the horizontal. And then the height of the bars are basically the frequency of the various scores that we have had. So this is a typical example of a bar chart. Then we can move away from the bar chart and also look at pie chart. Okay, let's look at this example. The grades obtained by 150 students in the quantitative method 1 exams are as follows. Construct a bar chart using this information. Already this one, you have each grade and the number of students that are scoring that particular grade. And you can see that it is representing, well, once you are teachers, you understand how the grades are done. Few of the students will be getting up there, and few will be down there. Majority of them will be in the middle. So this another example of the bar chart. Here, the number of students are now representing the frequency, and the various grades are being represented using the horizontal axis. So by plotting, you are going to get something like this. So ranging from A up to the E, realize that the height, as we saw in the number of students, is being plotted accordingly. For instance, when you talk about A, the height was 12. So this is where the 12 is going to be. And that is the height of that particular distribution in that particular order. So bar charts, the various bars are separated from one another, and they are having the same width. So if you look at the thickness of this bar, is the same as this one, as well as the remaining bars. And so the bars are of equal width, and their height is determined based on the frequency of that particular distribution. And so this is bar chart. Now we can talk about pie charts and the steps in constructing a pie chart. So basically, when you have pie charts, in one of my class, I was wondering why we call this one pie charts when we are representing data in a circular manner, or when we are trying to divide circle into a corresponding subdivisions or sectors that represent a given portion of a data, and we are calling it pie charts. I was thinking that pie means that the normal meat pie that we know. But somebody, in fact, a meal in one of my classes indicated that the pie, as in the meat pie, originally was circular. Is there any information to that? Is anybody having more information on that? Meat pie. Hello?
Yes, it's circular. Then when they fill it, then they turn the angle to get
Turn
it.
the 10. Aha. So that is it. So here we are looking at just dividing a circle into various sectors that correspond to the relative frequency of each class. And so once we talk about relative frequency, then it means that we are looking at that proportion of a circle that qualifies that particular sector. And so the steps that we go through in doing that are just listed here. First, you have to convert the frequency of each class into a proportion of a circle using the formula degree is equal to 360 times the frequency. The F here is representing the frequency, and then the M is also the sum of the frequencies. And so that is it. We use this basic formula to be able to share the circle, which is already 360. You know that the circumference of a circle is 360. Or in other words, mathematicians will tell you that the angles, the interior angles of a circle add up to 360 degrees. So we want to do that. Once we are able to get the degrees for the various classes that we have, then we find the degree corresponding to each class using the protractor as well as our compass. And then we just have to draw the circle, and then the protractor will help us to locate the various angles that correspond to the various classes that we have in consideration. So let's look at this example. Draw a pie chart for the following frequency distribution. Now, we have income and the items that you are spending the income on. So for instance, if this is your monthly income and you are thinking of spending it on food, clothing, airtime, and then some miscellaneous, by allocating these expenditure amounts to each item, for you to be able to present this on the pie chart, we are saying we should find the N in the formula. We have to convert each item into the proportion or the sector of a circle using the formula degree is equal to 360 times frequency over N. Remember we said frequency is the frequency of the item, F is the frequency of the item, And then the N here is looking at the summation of the frequencies. So this becomes the frequency. And when we sum it up, what do we get? When we sum them up, 900. Okay. So it means that for us to get the proportion of food in there, we are going to pick the frequency of food, which is 360 over the 900, and then we multiply it by the circumference of a circle, 360 degrees, which simply means that we are now looking at the proportion of food to the total times 360. And what answer do we get?
144.
144 degrees. Then we go to the second one, which is the clothing. We also follow the same procedure. 162 over 900 times 360. We do same for airtime. And miscellaneous. So what's the value for clothing? What's the value?
I got 64.8.
64.8. And then airtime will be 198 over 900 times 360 degrees. Please, somebody should be confirming the figures for us.
Airtime, I got 79.2.
79.2. Miscellaneous will be 180 over 900 times 360. $72. So for you to confirm whether you're on track, you can then add the 4 various degrees that you've computed, and they should sum up to 360 because it is that which you have divided into the various sectors. So you can confirm that. And once the computation is done, as we have seen here, then it means that we can take our compass and then our protractor, draw our big circle, and then we divide the circle into the various components. So we can have the circle here, for instance, like this. And then we have the middle or the radius. We place a protractor and then we are able to divide it. We can have one sector going for 144 degrees, and that is for the food. And another is 64. So let's assume this is 64 degrees, which is clothing. Then the next is 72. This is 72 for miscellaneous. And the last one is airtime, which is 79.2 airtime. So that is how we present data using the pie charts. So we are able to now divide the circle into the various sectors. Any questions so far? Any question?
Please, can you run the distance, the point at which is more than 5?
Yes, sometimes you can do that, but ideally, if there is no information on you running to the nearest whole number, I would advise that you leave it to 1 decimal or 2 decimal places.
Okay.
Any other concern? If there is no concern, let's move to the next one. So there is another way of presenting it. In this case, because we are using colors to describe them, you only have to have a legend that is explaining what which color is representing. So if you look at the color blue, it is now representing the food as described here. And already you know that the angle is 144 degrees. And you look at the next color, this is for clothing. And then the angle, corresponding angle, you have to indicate so that people can easily relate in that particular manner. Then we can talk about the histogram. For the pictogram and the rest, normally because of the levels that we teach, we can have a lot of them there. So that is it. Let's look at histogram and how we can differentiate histogram from that of bar charts. Histogram is also a way of representing data graphically, where you're going to have vertical bars displaying the frequency of the data, and also we're using a continuous vertical bar. Remember, in the bar chart, we said that we are going to have separate bars representing each class of the data. So that is one difference. Bar charts have separate bars, histograms have continuous bars. Another key difference is that bar chart is used to represent qualitative data. Histogram is also representing quantitative data. And so this is used to represent quantitative data because of the objective test that we normally write. You have to be paying attention to some of these things. We use histogram to represent quantitative data, either interval or a ratio level data. And then when you talk about the bar chart, it is usually used to represent qualitative data. That's nominal and then the ordinal level of data. So that is a key difference. Now, because we are using quantitative data to represent histogram, we normally use what we call the class boundaries. We use the class boundaries while the bar chart is using the class limits. So we have to pay attention to the difference between the class limit and the class boundary. Normally, when we talk about a limit is where we are seeing the confines of one particular category. For example, when you look at our grading system, we usually say that if you get below 50 means that 50 is exclusive. So once you get something up to 49, we consider that one in the university as a fail. And so you are going to rewrite that particular exams. However, when you see 50 to 54, between 50 to 54, we consider that one as D. And then when you get 55 to 59, that is a D plus. You get 60 to 64, that is a C. 65 to 69, C plus, in that particular order. Now, when you look at the the limits. We call it limits because it is defining the start and the end of distinctive classes. And so the limit usually gives you the exclusive or the inclusive criteria of the respective classes that you have, and hence the name class limit. Now let's connect it to the class boundaries. When we say a boundary, it is typically trying to communicate the normal boundary that we have. For instance, when you look at the boundary between Ghana and, let's say, Cote d'Ivoire, you realize that it is just sometimes you just have a footpath line that is determining where Ghana ends, and where exactly Ghana ends begins that of Cote d'Ivoire. In other words, when you even talk about our respective houses that we have, and we build a fence wall, that fence wall is just like a boundary that is determining the end of one's land and where the other person's land is starting. And so, because we are using continuous bars for the histogram, we only need a boundary, because the boundary which ends one class is going to be the starting of another class. And so, for instance, when you see a class boundary, it is going to be like 50 to 55, and then the next class is going to start from 55 to 60, because where the first class is ending, that is the 55, is going to be the starting point of the next class. And that is what we refer to as the class boundary. So whenever there is a class boundary, you realize that the first class end point becomes the starting point of the next. Whenever there is a distinctive figure, for instance, where 50 to 54, and then the next class is not 54 but 55, then it means that we are looking at the class limit. So the text clearly says that for you to be able to construct your histogram, you draw your vertical and the horizontal axis. You represent the frequencies on the vertical axis, whilst your class boundaries, not the limit. Here you have your class boundaries. You have your class boundaries on your horizontal axis, and then we use the frequencies as the height to draw the bars. However, you have to note that the frequency or the bars are going to be continuous. Continuous in the sense that when you draw an end one, that is going to be the starting of the other. So let's look at this example. Let's look at this example. The distribution for the record of high temperature of 50 states is given us below. Now you have the class limit. Always when you are giving the question, make sure you check whether the question is in class limit or class boundary. And always remember that for histogram, you are interested in the class boundaries. Hence, if the question is giving you the class limit, then we convert it into the class boundary. And how do we do that? We only find a way where we are going to make sure that the end of the first class begins the next class. So in this case, the end of this first class is 104, and then the start of the next is 105. So the question is, how do we make the upper of the first class the same as the lower of the next class, for us to have the continuity in the data? That is where normally we have the saying that subtract 0.5 from the lower class boundaries, lower class limits, and then we add 0.5 to the upper class limits. So by so doing, if you want to subtract the 0.5, then it means that you're going to have 99.5 as against 104.5. When we subtract 0.5 from 105, we get 104.5, and when we do add, we get 109.5. That is when we want to calculate the class boundaries. We just add the 0.5, and then we do this minus 0.5. Then you get 109.5 here, 114.5, 114.5, 119.5, 119.5, 124.5. Then we have 124.5 as against 129.5. Then finally 129.5 as against 134.5. So this is normally how we convert it. Now, the adding and then the subtraction is not always 0.5. There is a formula to use. However, you can just usually look through the data set and be able to determine the amount or the value you should add and subtract for you to get the answer. So when you get your class boundary, you just label, for instance, like this. Just label your bus, or let me try and then get it done here. You just draw your vertical and then the horizontal axis. Let's say this is your Y, this is your X. Now you are going to use the boundaries to indicate that. Let's assume here is 99.5. Then you put it again. Hey, whose fufu is getting ready? 104.5. And then we move on to 109.5. Then we move using, we are indicating the scale using the class boundaries. So 114.5 in that particular order. So for instance, if you want to plot, you label your frequencies as well. If you want to plot the first one, you are now going to plot your frequency as against the class boundaries. So the boundaries are 99.5 up to 104.5, and then the height is, let's say, 2. So you give it that height. The next one is now having 104.5 to 109.5 with a frequency of 8. So you just extend this one to the 8. Just extend this one to the 8, and then you draw your bar, followed by 18, which is starting from here. You go up and then you come down. And so your bars are going to be continuous. Where one bar is ended, you start with the next bar. And that is the histogram. Any question concern before we call it a day? Is there any concern? Yes, Corbina entry. Corbina, mute and talk.
So please, are we going to use the same method when we are dealing with on group data?
On group, usually when you have on group data, you realize that this particular type of data presentation, unlike the pie charts, this one is following the grouped one. So you really have to group the data before you can even go by this. Otherwise, if it is ungrouped, then it means that you have to go by the initial approach, where normally for the ungrouped, you can only use the bar charts because you will not have the classes. You don't even talk about class. And so that is what I mentioned earlier on, that depending on the characteristics of the data and which one you are likely to use to represent the data. So if the data is ungrouped, for instance, then it will be appealing that you either group it before you use the histogram, or you can now resort it using maybe the pie chart or any other appropriate tool. I hope it's okay.
Yes, sir.
Governor, is that okay? Yes. Any other concern? I want us to pause here so we continue with the other tools. However, we have others that we have to talk about. I will share the slide with you. I've seen you have some page. So I'll share the slides with you so that you go through. And then when we meet next week, we'll come and complete this one before we start with the activity for next week. So please, the reps, encourage your people that this is quite different as compared to the other courses. We need to go through the activities. When you have the slides, sometimes it's even difficult to understand. And the way I am going by the whole teaching, you realize that most of the notes I have to come in to explain and then add a lot to it. So you have to be taking notes to complement the slides. However, I'll share the slides with you and then you read the remaining. We just discuss them and then we can use the same information to start the next one, since the course is more of a continuity. Koblan, your hand is up.
No, sir.
Okay. If there is no concern, then I'll encourage you to read more. Our exams, I told you that your quizzes is going to be objective test, right? And then you have to be paying key attention to some of the issues that are being raised here. So there is no concern. Let's close now. Then we continue next week, God willing.
Okay.
All the best and enjoy your weekend.
Same to you.
You.